Most Christopher Nolan movies have one thing in common. And no, it's not just Michael Caine playing a wise older man.
Why do we force? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up.
It's the dominant use of two colors, blue and yellow. Or more precisely, the absence of red and green. After analyzing all 12 of Nolan's feature films frame by frame, we found just one scene that uses a red-green color contrast. This one from Tenet. Now, we get it that blue and yellow, or teal and orange, is generally the most used color combination in modern movies, and that red and green is not used nearly as much, but just one scene in 12 feature films. That must be more than a coincidence. It all traces back to a story from Nolan's early days in the industry. It was the mid-90s, and young Christopher Nolan was still finding his footing in the film industry. He wasn't yet this celebrated director who would bring audiences Inception or The Dark Knight, but a camera operator working behind the scenes. At the time, he worked under an experienced filmmaker, tasked with handling various equipment, including charging the camera batteries. The battery charger was a simple unit. It had a small LED light, a reliable tool for anyone with a sharp eye. Green meant the battery was charging, red meant it wasn't. Easy enough, right? Except for one small problem. Chris couldn't tell the difference between red and green. He was red-green colorblind, though he didn't make a fuss about it. He did what he could, trusting his instincts, but as the days went by, there was a growing issue on set. One morning, his boss arrived early, only to find the batteries dead. The cameras were prepped, the crew ready, but the equipment wasn't. It had happened more than once, and he quickly realized what was going on. Chris, unaware of the color change on the charger, had left the switch in the wrong position. The LED lights were like an unsolvable riddle to him. So, while Chris was great behind the camera, this particular task was proving problematic. Eventually, his boss had to step in, chuckling a bit at the mix-up. "Chris, I'm afraid we need to reassign the battery charging duties," he said, taking over the responsibility himself. Chris didn't seem bothered. His mind was already moving toward bigger things. Ideas far beyond the color of a charging light, and soon enough, the world would come to know his vision, one that didn't depend on whether the light was red or green. Before we talk about Nolan's first feature film that started it all, let's talk about something that's been a big part in the success of his films: editing. If you want to make your film or video ideas come to life, you needed good editing software, something like this video's sponsor, Filmora. Filmora is perfect for beginners, but packed with powerful tools that even the more experienced editors will love. It's designed to make editing easy for everyone. With its intuitive interface, you can quickly edit, cut, and enhance your videos. The drag-and-drop tools make it super simple to add transitions, effects, and even royalty-free music. It also offers features like motion tracking and keyframing, giving you more control over your edits when needed. We've partnered with Filmora before to recreate the Whiplash color grade from one of our earlier videos. So this time we had to try and recreate the color grade from some of Nolan's films. And this is what we got. Another good thing about Filmora is that it keeps up with the latest trends, using artificial intelligence and other smart technologies to make editing faster and more creative. And with its affordable pricing, you can get great results without spending a fortune. If you want to try Filmora for free, check out our link in the description. Thanks Filmora for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to Nolan and the film that started it all. Nolan's first feature film, Following, was shot in black and white. It's almost poetic, considering Nolan's colorblindness, that he started his career without the distraction of color.
Following is a story of a writer, somebody who wants to be a writer, and he takes to following individual people, picking someone out of the crowd, seeing where they go, what they do, and becomes addicted to this, quite frankly.
I'd been on my own for a while and getting kind of lonely. That's when I started following. I started to follow people.
The black and white cinematography strips the film down to its essentials: light, shadow, and texture. It's in this minimalist approach that Nolan first began to craft the strong visual identity that would later define his work.
I think what Following represents is kind of the peak of what I was able to do on my own or just with friends, just using our own resources.
The main reason why Nolan chose to film Following in black and white is the film's budget. It was just $6,000. This budget was so low that it didn't allow them to build custom sets. Instead, they had to film on already available public locations, which meant they didn't have the control over the color palette of the locations and set design. For that reason, he chose to shoot with black and white 16mm film.
Because I knew that the speed with which we were going to have to work, the conditions under which we were going to have to film a scene, to try and do that with color lighting and color photography, it would be very, very difficult to get anything acceptable looking, anything with any feeling of style.
With this decision, he tackled the other two problems that arose because of the low budget. 16mm film was cheaper than shooting in 35mm color. It eliminated the need to balance the color temperature of the lights. With this, he eliminated the variable of color temperature and only had to focus on lighting with contrast, which he did. Nolan leaned heavily into contrast, using sharp lighting to build tension and create an atmosphere of mystery. Without color, the film relies purely on the interplay between light and dark to establish mood and tone, a technique Nolan would continue to develop throughout his career. The absence of color also puts the focus on composition and framing, drawing the audience's eye to important details in the story. This early experience of working in black and white seems to have influenced how Nolan approaches color in his later films. Rather than using color to overwhelm the senses, he prefers to control it, using it sparingly to enhance key moments or elements within the story.
Okay, so what am I doing? Oh, I'm chasing this guy. No, he's chasing me.
Nolan's breakthrough film, Memento, is a perfect example of his careful, deliberate use of color. For starters, Memento had a budget of $9 million, which is a significant increase from the $6,000 for his previous film following. But he still hasn't given up on black and white technique. In Memento, Nolan blends black and white and color sequences to represent different narrative timelines. The black and white scenes move in chronological order, while the color scenes unfold in reverse, creating a complex puzzle that mirrors the protagonist's fractured memory.
That's basically the end of the movie. This stuff is the black and white stuff. This is color, and this is running backwards as a series of jumps. And what we do is we cut between the two the whole way through. So we alternate scene here, scene there, scene there, scene there, scene there, scene there, and they meet towards the end of the film.
This mixture of black and white with color serves a narrative purpose beyond just a stylistic choice. By separating timelines through visual cues, Nolan uses color, or the lack of it, to help the audience navigate the disorienting structure of the film. The stark black and white footage feels cold and clinical, mirroring the protagonist's methodical attempts to piece together his life. In contrast, the color scenes have a more immediate, emotionally charged feel, reflecting protagonist's confusion and desperation in the present. 23 years later, Nolan would again use this mixture of color and black and white, but this time for a different reason.
The black and white parts in the script and the color parts, it's something that Chris had written in the script. It was for him some sort of a way to really separate those two narratives, Strauss's point of view and Oppenheimer's point of view.
Never thought of studying physics formally, Mr. Strauss. I chose to sell shoes. Louis Strauss was once a lowly shoe salesman. No, just a shoe salesman.
It felt very much like a way to get it very clear to the filmmakers or the people that were going to work on the script how to view into this world at the particular moment.
Why don't you have a Nobel Prize? Aren't you a general? They're making me one for this. Perhaps I'll have the same luck. Nobel Prize for making a bomb. Alfred Nobel invented dynamite.
Nolan's films often have a signature look, dark muted tones with strategic bursts of color. He tends to rely heavily on contrasts. Deep blues, cold grays, and warm ambers dominate his palettes. In films like Inception, Interstellar, and Dunkirk, you'll notice that instead of oversaturating the frame with vibrant hues, Nolan's color choices are more restrained. They're often practical, grounded, and serve the narrative rather than overwhelming it. His use of color supports the realism he's known for, since his stories often deal with complex ideas like time manipulation, existential crisis, or the boundaries of reality. His visuals aim to keep us rooted in a world that feels familiar, even when the concepts are mind-bending.
My life is like a Christopher Nolan movie. I don't really understand what's going on.
The colors don't scream for attention. They exist to guide the audience through the emotional or intellectual experience. Take Inception, for example. The film moves through different layers of dreams, but Nolan uses subtle shifts in lighting and color to distinguish them. It's not about bold differences, but subtle cues, guiding the audience without breaking immersion. Or look at the Dark Knight trilogy. The city of Gotham itself feels like a character, its blues and grays emphasizing its cold, harsh environment. The way Nolan uses desaturated colors throughout the trilogy heightens the sense of tension and grit, aligning perfectly with the dark, psychological themes of the films. Notice how the villain, Joker, stands out with his vibrant purple suit and smeared red lips. This choice of contrast emphasizes his chaotic nature against the more controlled world of Bruce Wayne. What's interesting about Nolan's approach is that he seems to use color less as a decorative tool and more as a psychological one. He understands how the human brain processes visual information and uses it to affect the viewer's emotional experience. In Interstellar, Nolan plays with the color palette in space sequences. There's an almost monochromatic look to the outer space scenes. Blacks, whites, and deep blues dominate. These choices emphasize the emptiness and isolation of space, making the moments when warmth and color appear back on Earth stand out in contrast. Nolan's choice to keep space as bleak and colorless as possible adds to the feeling of distance, both physically and emotionally. It's not just about space being cold, it's about the isolation the characters feel as they move farther away from home. And then there's Dunkirk, where Nolan leans into his colorblindness by favoring earthy, natural tones. The washed-out blues of the ocean, the pale skies, and the dull greens of military gear. These colors put us right into the thick of the action, heightening the intensity of the story. The focus isn't on any one vibrant color, but rather on contrast and atmosphere. What's crucial to Nolan's style is the use of light and shadow. He's known for his sharp contrasts, where light cuts through darkness, creating striking imagery. In Tenet, Nolan uses this technique to create a sense of mystery and tension. Whether it's a bright sunset illuminating characters as they discuss timelines or dark shadows enveloping a scene in an inversion fight, light always plays an integral role. Much of Nolan's distinct color style comes from his cinematographers. These collaborations have been vital in translating Nolan's vision, especially given his colorblindness. Both of his cinematographers share his preference for natural lighting and practical effects, which keeps the color schemes grounded and authentic, regardless of the high-concept storytelling. Together, they developed a style that avoids heavy digital manipulation of colors. Nolan famously prefers shooting on film over digital, which also contributes to the muted, organic feel of his movies. The grain of film gives a texture to the colors that digital can sometimes lose in pursuit of clarity. For Nolan, this old-school approach to filmmaking helps anchor the audience in a tangible reality, even when the subject matter is anything but. Another factor worth mentioning is Nolan's limited use of CGI.
You want to crash a plane?
He favors practical effects, which naturally affects the color palette, since he's working in real environments with natural lighting. This can be seen in the breathtaking visuals of Dunkirk, where real planes, boats, and locations were used. The colors in those shots are not artificially amped up. Instead, they reflect the true harshness of war: the pale beaches, the cold blue sea, and the dark, smoky skies. Nolan lets the natural world tell its own visual story. If you want to make your videos and photos look like Christopher Nolan movies, check out our collection of movie LUTs and Lightroom profiles. Link will be in the description. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this, and we'll see you in the next one.